Tragedy struck when I received that call, shattering my life in an instant. My mother had passed away, and as I stood by her grave, my heart ached not just from loss but from the chilling conversation unfolding between my fiancé and his mother. They discussed my inheritance as if it were mere currency, oblivious to the storm brewing within me. I would soon unveil their dark secrets, and you won't believe the lengths I went to for revenge. My name is Lena, and I'm a 35-year-old marketing executive living in Austin, Texas. People often ask me how I ended up where I am today, and the truth is, it's a story filled with love, loss, and a painful journey to self-discovery. Growing up, my life was colored by the busy schedules of my parents. They both worked long hours, leaving me in the care of my grandparents, who were nothing short of my saviors. My grandmother had a knack for making the world feel warm and safe. She would always have my favorite cookies waiting when I returned from school, and her hugs felt like home. My grandfather, on the other hand, was more reserved. He had a stern demeanor but was always there waiting for me when I came home, silently supporting me in his own way. As I grew older, I began to understand the sacrifices my parents made for our family. They were working tirelessly to provide for us, but in doing so, they missed out on so many precious moments. While my friends shared stories about family dinners and weekend outings, I often felt a pang of loneliness. Yet, the love for my grandparents filled that void, and for that, I am eternally grateful. With the encouragement of my grandparents, I graduated high school and went on to college, earning a degree in marketing. It was a turning point in my life. I found my passion and quickly began to carve out a career in the bustling corporate world. Despite my initial dream of becoming a homemaker, my job filled me with a sense of purpose I didn't know I was missing. I loved the challenges of my work and the creative freedom it afforded me. It was during this time that I met Marcus. He was 40 and a freelance graphic designer with a charming smile that instantly caught my attention. We met at a local coffee shop, where I often worked on marketing projects. One day, he bumped into me as he was carrying a large stack of papers, sending them flying everywhere. I couldn't help but laugh as he scrambled to pick them up. "Sorry about that. I should have watched where I was going," he said, his cheeks turning a light shade of red. "It's okay. It happens to the best of us," I replied, helping him gather his scattered papers. That moment sparked something between us, and soon we were deep in conversation, discovering our mutual interests. As we spent more time together, our bond grew stronger. Marcus was attentive and caring, and he often made me feel like I was the most important person in the world. We quickly fell in love, and after a year of dating, he proposed. I was over the moon. It felt like my dreams were finally coming true. I thought I had found my partner for life, the one who would support me as I had always wanted. However, as our relationship progressed, I began to notice a troubling dynamic between Marcus and his mother, Evelyn. She was 65, a retired nurse with a controlling nature. Their relationship was intense, filled with an unhealthy dependence. I sensed it during our first meeting when Evelyn referred to him as her baby. I felt a knot in my stomach, but I wanted to believe that love could conquer all, so I chose to ignore these red flags. Evelyn seemed pleasant enough, always welcoming me with a bright smile. She would often ask about my work and our plans for the future. Yet, beneath her surface charm, I could feel a possessiveness that made me uneasy. As we prepared for our wedding, I tried to keep the peace, hoping that Marcus would eventually set healthy boundaries with his mother. Then, tragedy struck. My mother passed away unexpectedly due to a heart condition. The shock was overwhelming. I remember the day clearly. I had just finished a meeting at work when I received the call. I felt as if the ground had been ripped from beneath my feet. My mother, who had always been a source of strength, was suddenly gone. I barely had time to process it before I was thrown into funeral arrangements. During the funeral, I stood beside Marcus, looking for comfort, but what I received was anything but. Evelyn made an insensitive comment that stung deeply. "Well, at least you'll inherit all that insurance money, as an only child. You should consider yourself lucky," she remarked, her tone almost cheerful. I felt my heart drop. Instead of comforting me, she was calculating my loss. I turned to Marcus, hoping he would defend me, but to my dismay, he merely nodded in agreement with his mother. It was at that moment that I began to see the cracks in our relationship. As the weeks passed, the grief was suffocating, and I struggled to cope. Despite the support from my grandparents and friends, I felt increasingly isolated. Marcus seemed more aligned with his mother than with me, and I was left feeling abandoned at a time when I needed him the most. But I couldn't dwell on it for too long. I returned to work, trying to focus on my responsibilities, but thoughts of my mother and the loss loomed heavy in my heart. I also couldn't shake the feeling that something was terribly wrong in my relationship. I began to dig deeper into Marcus's and Evelyn's behavior, trying to make sense of the uncomfortable feelings I had been suppressing. Then, I stumbled upon a disturbing truth that shattered my world. One evening, while cleaning up after a small dinner party, I accidentally found a hidden recording device in Marcus's office. Curiosity piqued. I pressed play, and my heart raced as I heard Evelyn's voice. She was discussing plans that were chilling. Little did I know, this was just the beginning of an unraveling that would change everything. The hidden recording device sat in my hand, feeling heavier than I ever imagined possible. I took a deep breath, trying to calm my racing heart. What had I stumbled upon? As I pressed play, the room filled with Evelyn's voice, and I felt a chill run down my spine. Everything is going according to plan. Once Lena inherits that money, Marcus and I will finally have the life we've dreamed of, Evelyn said, her tone dripping with satisfaction. I felt sick to my stomach as the reality of her words sank in. I kept listening, unable to pull myself away. With her mother gone, she won't even suspect anything. After all, she'll be too busy grieving. I'll make sure Marcus stays close to me, and with Lena's inheritance, we can buy that villa. It'll be perfect for us. Each word cut deeper than the last. It was as if my whole world was crashing down around me. My mother had not just passed away. Her death had been a tool in Evelyn's twisted game. I felt rage boiling inside me, overshadowing the grief I had been trying to process. When the recording ended, I dropped the device as if it had burned me. I couldn't believe what I had just heard. Evelyn had manipulated me, and Marcus had stood by her side, complicit in her schemes. I felt betrayed and furious. How could I have been so blind? The next few days were a blur. I went through the motions at work, but my mind was consumed with thoughts of vengeance. I could no longer stay silent. I had to confront Marcus and Evelyn, but how? They wouldn't simply admit their wrongdoing. I needed proof. My instincts told me to gather more evidence. I began to watch them closely, hoping to catch them in another compromising conversation. They were often together, and I made excuses to be around whenever I could, pretending everything was fine while my heart raced with anxiety. One evening, I invited Marcus over for dinner. I wanted to keep things casual, but every interaction felt like a performance. He arrived with a bouquet of flowers, his face glowing with what I assumed was love. I forced a smile as I let him in. "Lena, these are for you," he said, handing me the flowers. I wanted to feel happy, but instead, I felt like a fraud. "Thank you, they're beautiful," I replied, trying to sound genuine. "How was your day?" "Oh, you know, the usual," he shrugged, but I could see the tension in his eyes. I knew he was on edge, likely because he felt the weight of my unspoken accusations. We sat down for dinner, and I attempted to engage in light conversation. "Did you talk to your mom today?" I asked casually, watching for any hint of deception. "Yeah, she's fine. Just worrying about us, you know," he replied, a hint of nervousness in his voice. I had to push further. "What do you mean by worrying about us?" I probed, looking straight into his eyes. "I can't help but feel there's more going on than you're telling me." He hesitated, fidgeting with his fork. "Lena, it's just my mom cares a lot, that's all." His evasiveness only fueled my determination. After dinner, while he washed the dishes, I slipped away to his office, searching for anything that could corroborate what I had heard. As I rifled through drawers, my heart raced. Then, I found a folder labeled Plans. My hands trembled as I opened it. Inside were documents related to the villa purchase, with calculations that made my stomach drop. Evelyn had included projected expenses, and at the bottom, a line that chilled me. Lena's inheritance, $450,000. My breath caught in my throat. They were planning to use my mother's death to finance their dream home. Just then, I heard the door creak open. "Lena, what are you doing?" Marcus's voice broke through my thoughts. I quickly closed the folder and turned to face him. "I was just looking for a book," I lied, hoping he would notice the fear in my eyes.
But he could see right through me.
"Lena, you shouldn't be going through my things." "It's not right," he said, his voice tinged with irritation. I felt a surge of defiance. "Not right? You think it's not right that I'm trying to understand what's happening in my own life? You and your mother are planning to use my inheritance to build your future, while I'm left here picking up the pieces." "Stop. You're being irrational," he snapped back, his temper flaring. "You're grieving. I get it, but you're making accusations without any proof." I took a deep breath, my mind racing. "I have proof, Marcus. I heard your mother. I found a recording of her discussing everything, how she tampered with my mother's medication, how she planned to use my inheritance to buy the villa." His face paled as the weight of my words sunk in. "You're lying. My mother wouldn't." "Wouldn't what?" I interrupted, feeling my resolve harden. "She wouldn't kill my mother for money? How can you defend her after everything I've found?" The tension between us escalated, and I felt as if we were standing on a precipice. I could see the struggle in his eyes, the conflict between his love for me and his loyalty to his mother. In that moment, I knew I had to act decisively. "Marcus, I want you to think carefully about what you're doing. This isn't just about us anymore. It's about justice for my mother. I won't let you and Evelyn walk away from this unscathed," I said firmly. As I turned to leave, I caught a glimpse of the hurt in his eyes, but I didn't feel pity. I felt empowered. I knew what I had to do next. I would not just confront them. I would gather all the evidence and plan my revenge. That night, I began to formulate my plan. I would invite them both to the villa, the very place they planned to steal my inheritance for, and I would expose them. I started gathering all the recordings, documents, and evidence I had collected. It was time to take back control of my life and find the justice my mother deserved. I spent the next few days preparing for the confrontation, my heart pounding with a mix of fear and determination. I had to be strategic. Marcus and Evelyn had to believe I was still in the dark about their plans. I decided to invite them both to the villa under the pretense of discussing wedding preparations. It was a calculated move. I knew that by luring them into a familiar setting, they would let their guard down. On the day of the meeting, I arrived early at the villa, feeling a rush of anxiety. The place was beautiful, but it felt tainted by the knowledge of what Marcus and his mother had plotted. I made sure to set up hidden cameras throughout the house, carefully placing them in corners where they would be inconspicuous. I wanted to capture every moment of their confessions. When Marcus arrived, he greeted me with a warm smile that made my stomach twist. "Hey, Lena, this place is amazing. I can't believe you got it all set up so quickly." He was oblivious to the storm brewing beneath the surface. "Thanks. I thought we could discuss our future here. You know, get excited about our wedding and everything," I replied, forcing a smile. Evelyn arrived shortly after, her demeanor cheerful but with a glint of suspicion in her eyes. "What a lovely place you've picked, Lena. I'm sure it'll be perfect for you and Marcus," she said, her voice dripping with false sweetness. "Absolutely. I can't wait to start this new chapter," I said, trying to keep my tone light. As we settled into the living room, I took a deep breath, knowing that this was the moment I had been waiting for. I casually led the conversation toward our plans for the future. "Marcus, have you thought more about how we'll finance everything? I mean, with my inheritance coming in, it could help us a lot," I said, gauging their reactions. Evelyn's eyes flickered with alarm, but she quickly masked it with a smile. "Oh, sweetheart, don't worry about that. We'll figure it out. Family always supports each other, right?" she replied, her tone unnervingly upbeat. As they chatted, I felt the tension in the air. I knew they were both hiding something. "You know, I've been thinking about my mom a lot lately. It's hard to believe she's gone," I said, lowering my voice as if I were sharing a secret. "Of course, it's difficult," Marcus replied, shifting in his seat. But we can honor her memory by building a beautiful life together. I had to push harder. What if I told you I found some interesting information about my mother's death? I leaned back, studying their faces. Like some details I hadn't considered before. Marcus looked at me, confusion etched on his face. What do you mean? I leaned in closer, my heart racing. I heard some things that suggest it wasn't just a heart condition. There are implications that someone might have interfered. Evelyn's expression darkened, and I could see the wheels turning in her mind. Lena, that's not something you should be thinking about. It's just your grief talking, she replied, her voice tight. I glanced at Marcus, who looked uneasy. Is it? Or is it the truth? I countered, letting the silence stretch. I was pulling them into my trap, and I could feel their anxiety building. Then I decided to take the plunge. I know the truth, Evelyn. I found the recording where you talked about how you planned everything. How you tampered with my mother's medication. You thought you could get away with it, didn't you? The room fell silent. Marcus's face went pale, and I could see the realization dawning on him. Evelyn's facade cracked, and her eyes widened in shock. Lena, you don't understand. No, you don't understand. I have all the evidence, I interrupted, a fierce determination surging through me. I'm going to make sure you pay for what you've done. As I turned to grab my phone, I felt a rush of adrenaline. I had them cornered, and there was no way out for them now. The hidden cameras had recorded every word, and the truth was about to be exposed. I was no longer the victim. I was the one in control. The confrontation had only just begun, and I was ready to take back everything they had tried to steal from me. The tension in the room was palpable. Marcus stood frozen, his eyes darting between me and his mother, who was now visibly trembling. I could feel my heart racing, a mix of fear and exhilaration coursing through my veins. I had waited for this moment for so long, and I wouldn't let it slip away. Lena, please, you don't know what you're saying. Evelyn pleaded, her voice shaky.
We can talk about this.
Let's just forget it ever happened. Forget? You think I can just forget that you plotted to kill my mother for her money? I snapped, my voice steady and unwavering. You took her away from me for greed. That's unforgivable. Marcus stepped forward, desperation written all over his face. Lena, I didn't know. I thought my mother was just being protective. I never thought. Never thought what, Marcus? I interrupted, my voice rising. Never thought she could hurt someone? Your loyalty to her has blinded you to the truth. I was right there in the dark, thinking you were my partner. But you were just another pawn in her game. Evelyn's demeanor shifted from pleading to defensive. You're making a terrible mistake. You have no idea how hard it is to take care of everything alone. I did what I had to do. Her desperation was alarming, but it only fueled my determination. I pulled out my phone, scrolling to the video files I had recorded. You know what, Evelyn? I have everything documented. Every word you said, every plan you made. And I'm going to the police with it. You will face justice for what you did. Evelyn's face drained of color. You wouldn't dare. Think about what you're doing, Lena. You're ruining your future with Marcus. My eyes met Marcus's, and I saw the conflict within him. My future? My future was stolen the moment your mother decided to take my mom's life for money. This is about justice, Marcus. It's about making sure no one else has to suffer like I have. With newfound resolve, I pressed record on my phone, turning the camera toward them. I want both of you to explain what you did. The world deserves to know the truth. As I began to capture their responses, I felt a weight lift off my shoulders. Evelyn sputtered incoherently, trying to deflect blame, while Marcus looked at me, realization dawning on him. Lena, I'm sorry. I can't believe I didn't see it before. I know this is hard to hear, I replied softly, but you need to understand the magnitude of what your mother has done. You have to take responsibility. Evelyn, cornered and panicked, suddenly lunged for my phone, but I sidestepped her grasp. You think you can silence me? I'm done being afraid of you. With the evidence securely recorded, I called the police, my hands shaking but my resolve unbroken. I reported everything, ensuring they had access to the recordings. When the officers arrived, I felt a rush of liberation. The truth was finally coming to light. Evelyn and Marcus were arrested that day, their world unraveling as they faced the consequences of their actions. As I watched them being led away, a sense of closure washed over me. The years of manipulation, fear, and grief were finally behind me. In the weeks that followed, I began to rebuild my life. I poured myself into my work, finding new strength in my career. With the insurance money from my mother's policies, I invested in my future, dedicating myself to causes that would help those affected by domestic abuse and manipulation. The journey to self-discovery had been painful, but it had also been transformative. I learned that I was stronger than I had ever realized. I had faced betrayal head-on and emerged not just unbroken, but empowered. I no longer looked at the villa as a symbol of loss. Instead, it became a place of healing and growth. As I stood in the living room, looking out at the sunset, I felt a sense of peace envelop me. My mother's memory would live on, not through anger or revenge, but through the love and strength she had instilled in me. In the end, I was no longer just Lena, the girl who had lost everything. I was Lena, a survivor, ready to embrace a future defined by my own choices. I had found my voice, and I was ready to live life on my own terms, free from the chains of betrayal and fear.